Now we're going to focus on the actual process of forgiveness, all right? And it's webinar 16, the unnatural nature of forgiveness. And if anyone needs to go, you know, you can go because we're well over time. And you will get a recording of part 1 and 2 together. So here's just to give you a little overview, and then I'm going to illustrate it more specifically. The persecutor will ask for forgiveness when they let go of power and accept the victim. A false bid of forgiveness will come when they are asking forgiveness, but they still haven't let go of power. Or when they're asking for forgiveness and they're still not accepting the victim. That's a false bid, all right? The willingness to let go of power and accept the victim for who they are, to accept the victimization of the victim, to accept the role of the victim, all of it, and even to accept the strengths of the victim, to accept the equal status of the victim. That's when the persecutor is ready to make a genuine bid of forgiveness. This is really key, all right? Now, naturally, the victim is going to find difficulty in accepting the persecutor, in accepting that forgiveness, because there's a natural desire to take revenge or to still cling to the victimhood, meaning it could be, I will not forgive you, or it will be, I don't believe you, okay? So what this means is once the persecutor drops power, who must pick it up? Okay, by law of polarity, if one side drops the power, the other is going to pick it up. So it's an automatic transfer of power. However, the victim may not accept that power. Unconsciously or consciously, they may throw it back at the persecutor. Why? Because there's a swap of roles. Okay? And the victim, that's why I'm saying you can give the victim power, they will not know what to do with it if they remain in the role of victim, okay? They just won't. So what can happen is there's the transfer of power and they say, all right, now I'm in the lead position. I could take revenge on you. I can make you pay. I can give you a taste of your own medicine. Or I could still refuse that power and still cling to victimhood and say, you're not sad enough, you're not sorry enough, you're not this, you're not that, I'm still convinced you're persecuting me, okay? And they will not accept the bid of forgiveness, all right? So it's a death's door just to accept the bid of forgiveness. Now, forgiveness begins by accepting the other person first and asking forgiveness. And then having that forgiveness to be accepted, and it's then an internal forgiveness and an acceptance. So forgiveness begins by accepting the other person first and asking their forgiveness, then accepting that forgiveness, and then being accepted by each other. So there's a mutual forgiveness and being accepted, and then there is the forgiveness and acceptance of self.
What if the other person, there is no more as a person?
Well, the point is, the forgiveness will not be complete if one person refuses to accept, if one person refuses to forgive.
No, I mean, the person is dead. As an example, you gave us at the beginning.
Then what you're doing is an internal reconciliation, and we do this work where it's like working remotely with a relationship. Mm-hmm. We carry two relationships: the internal relationship, my perception, conception, or memory of you, and then the physical dynamic we have when we're in the same room together. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing with grief work and with reconciling with a loved one or a dead person is you're working that internal relationship. Mm-hmm. All right, and allow, because you're going to start playing both roles within yourself. You're going to role play them as persecuting back, because you imagine, oh yeah, based on history, this is what they'd say or do. And you're going to role play yourself as victim towards them. And you're going to have that internal battle. Or reversed, you are persecutor, they are victim.
which means that at a certain point in time for any victims, there is this opportunity to leave and then to reconcile internally with herself.
Yes.
Yeah,
And this is what the recommendation is. Don't wait to reconcile with the other person in the same room. Begin this process internally.
Right. Okay.
And it already begins to shift the relationship, because when you start letting go of the role, it forces them to be letting go. What might happen is it's creating a strong imbalance. But when you have enough resilience and you stay resilient with them, they start to drop as well. And the relationship itself starts to drop. So the more you start to let go unconditionally, they automatically begin to mirror it. And so we can ease the reconciliation and forgiveness cycle by doing internal work first. Yeah, go ahead, Benjamin.
I feel this is quite consistent with the concept of quantum mechanics. So the way you perceive determines the result. And we actually trained and exercises in last weekend's conflict course quite extensively. So I imagine the other one. So I have in my mind a model of my counterpart. And based on that model, I derive my actions. So once I reconcile within myself, I do it with the model of him, not directly with him. However, viewing reality through that lens changes already the reality.
Right. Because you're not really changing yourself, you're changing the dynamic. And that affects both roles. And that's exactly what quantum entanglement is based upon, or as described. Okay. It's not the shift of the particle, it is the shift of the connection between. They're both coming from source. They're both manifesting as opposites to create a game. So when the dynamic at source is shifted and has let go of something, the dynamic is different, therefore the roles are different, therefore the behaviors are different. All right, so the whole dynamic is different, and therefore both sides change to reflect the dynamic. All right. It's another way to think about entanglement. All right.
So once we have shifted the dynamic,
both
which is
people
inherent
change
in us, that propagates through the fractal nature, through everything else. So,
and it'll have a ripple effect. Absolutely.
Yeah.
By the way, on the very large meta level, for each person that takes themselves through the full reconciliation and forgiveness cycle, there's a ripple effect throughout entire humanity on that meta level, because we've shifted the fractal on the story that the entire of humanity holds. And then one person does it, it's easier for the next and easier for the next. And then there can be a ripple effect, all right? And that's how we gradually dissolve the game of humanity for whatever lesson we have to learn through race, the race game, the gender game, the sexual orientation game, the power game, the patriarchy game, the matriarchy, all these games, okay? I mean, there's a limited palette of games that we're playing, and they all contain a lesson for us to learn. And when we absorb the lesson, absorb that we are both roles, reconcile that within ourselves, we can understand the dynamic and forgive the dynamic and forgive ourselves and the players. Then there's no need to play that game anymore, because we've learned what we learned from it. We can now move on to another evolutionary level of a game. That's the meta level of it, okay? But through the entanglement, the fractal nature, for each person that drops into forgiveness and reconciliation, they make it easier for the next. Now, I said this before, forgiveness will feel unnatural because it goes against the fundamental law of counterbalance, which means an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Okay, that's the natural law of the universe, to constantly balance things out. Yeah, go ahead, Benjamin.
So would you say that, just a second, this noise. Would you say that the reason for this victim cycle, the victim-perpetrator cycle, is to point us towards the death door we should go through.
Yeah.
So for increased acceptance of the yet unaccepted things in us.
Yeah, it's okay. So this is where you took my mind, and I'll say it, because someone would say, what kind of sick joke is the creator playing on us? Why would somebody design a universe where we're born as a victim and we spend our life being persecuted and then we persecute back and create more victims? What the hell, right?
Yeah. Yeah, in plain English, yeah, that's
Okay, so think about it differently. In fact, take away the words victim persecutor. Pure essence, pure potential, okay? Our world is designed for us to express all the aspects of essence, to manifest all possibilities of potential. In order to do that, essence can remain pure, unity and essence, and remain at potential. But in order to express itself, it needs resistance in order to expand and manifest. So we're born innocent, we face resistance. That creates experience, that creates friction, that creates us waking up and paying attention to all the potential that we can use and express and learn and know about. And by the end of the cycle, it's like the potential has fully manifested, and now it can go back to inertia and potential with full knowledge and awareness of itself, having explored all possibilities. In order to explore and manifest all those possibilities, it needs to meet resistance in order to fully manifest. That's the world of duality. We move from inertia to manifestation, and from manifestation to inertia. Both forces work against each other. We need friction to create. So what's the friction? The persecution. In order for innocence to blossom, it needs the resistance to blossom. And then it's fully blossomed, and then it can start going back to its essence and dissipating, okay? I don't know if that makes sense. That's highly esoteric, but that's moving from essence to full manifestation back to essence. Yeah. Very esoteric and metaphysical, but let me know if I can move on or sit on that and maybe return to it. Yeah, go ahead, Benjamin.
To some extent, it makes sense to me. And I feel that the discovery of, so I can only take it for real if I myself discovered that thing, and I can only discover it if it is in a polarity there.
Right. So, for example, you have an innocent baby learning to walk. Mm-hmm. They stand up, they wobble, they have the possibility of falling, okay? And then they fall. Well, they just got persecuted by gravity. Now they have to get up, try again, and they're, by gravity providing that resistance, by the resistance of their muscles being weak, but the will wants to stand up, they are manifesting their power to walk. But without the resistance, they'd never really manifest it. So do we say that the earth and gravity are mean persecutors because they didn't just allow the baby to just walk perfectly the first time?
Well, it's even crazier. If you take a look at plants, their direction to the sun is derived by the gravitational force. It's not the sun, it's a gravitational force.
The gravitational force.
So
the electromagnetic force, yes, that has them move up and dig down. Okay, they're moving in two directions. Anyways, so do you guys see? This is about resistance of force. Okay, the resistance is considered the persecutor. The creative flow is considered the victim.
What I love about this concept is that it even relates to the deconstruct to reconstruct.
Yeah,
analogy.
Deconstruct.
So
that's right.
You have all the checks about the resistance means I have always checks in place. So is this structure I'm about to create a stable one? Can I trust this?
Yeah.
Is there real resilience? Can I trust this as resilience, or is this a false resilience?
Right. So ultimately where we can go, and it's a very difficult leap to make, is how is the persecutor actually providing a means for me to promote and express my strengths and creativity? Instead of seeing the persecutor as the enemy, it's a teacher, and it's a way to open the path for me to become greater and greater. But I must go through the experience of the resistance that the persecutor provides in order for me to wake up and learn about my own hidden strengths and creativity that have not manifested yet. The persecutor is there to poke them into existence, all right? It's a very different way. And when we start thinking that way, we're looking at dream level. How are the two opposites complementary? And the persecutor is learning from the victim as well, okay? The victim is a teacher to the persecutor, okay? So they're teachers to each other. When we start looking at it that way, when we put our pride aside and start looking at it that way, we'll start to learn from each other, and we'll move faster towards resilience and unity with each other, okay? So I'm going to walk you through the phases of forgiveness here. You have your persecutor and you have your victim. And it begins with, like I said, the persecutor accepts the victim. There's a bit of acceptance, and they are accepting the victim, okay? It is a true acceptance. And before that, the persecutor is already letting go of power. They're putting down their shield in order to see the victim for the first time. They're putting down their weapon and their mask. Okay, the persecutor is in a vulnerable position to now truly see and accept the victim. Okay, then there's a transfer of power. And what's needed is that the victim recognizes that acceptance. So the persecutor says, victim, I accept you for all of who you are. I accept you. And the victim goes, oh, you accept me. And that needs to penetrate, because for both of them to be able to do that, they're moving through a death's door, and that's crumbling the identity. It's already starting to crumble away both roles, persecutor, victim. They're both vulnerable here, okay? Then from there, now the persecutor can make a bid for forgiveness. They can say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything I've done. I'm sorry. Or please forgive me for what I've done. That is a real transfer of power now to the victim, because now the victim has all the power, and they can say, I accept your apology and I forgive you. Or I do not accept your apology. I do not forgive. Okay. So that needs to be worked out. That's a whole other death's door for them. It's a death's door for the persecutor to move from acceptance to asking forgiveness. It is a death's door for the victim to move from recognition that the persecutor accepts them to accepting the bid of forgiveness and actually forgiving. Okay, there's a lot to work through there. So what that means is both may need to ventilate. Maybe the victim needs to get a taste of persecuting and exacting revenge and retaliation until they can get to the point that they say, I accept your bid for forgiveness and I forgive you. But it's not finished there. Then the persecutor needs to recognize that the victim accepted the forgiveness. You got to really seal the deal here. Okay? I ask forgiveness, you accept my forgiveness. And I recognize that you accepted my forgiveness. Therefore, I can't come back later. Once I've recognized it, I can't come back later and say, you know what? I told you I'm sorry and you didn't believe me. When I recognize that you've accepted my forgiveness, I can't hold power over you anymore. Do you understand? Same then, the victim has to recognize that I recognized it, okay? So there's checks and balances here. That means nobody can hold grudges, regrets, and power over each other. They're really cleaning each other out, and they're cleaning themselves out, okay? you guys follow what I'm doing here? Please forgive me. I forgive you. I see that you forgive me and I accept the forgiveness. And I see that you've accepted my forgiveness. Okay, that's a whole phase. Yeah, Benjamin, did you want to say something there? I see your hand.
So is this nothing but different color of repetitions?
In a way, yeah. Like we teach in EED, repetition, so that the statements get repeated back and forth until they penetrate. Yeah, this is a long phase to go through. Okay, do you see how the 4 elements have to be in place here? And for each of them, this may be difficult because in order to accept forgiveness by the persecutor, in order for the victim to accept, they've got to let a lot of stuff go because they're towing that line. Because if they say, yes, you're forgiven, they're also sacrificing going over that line. They're saying, I choose not to persecute back. Okay.
But what if they say, yes, you're forgiven, but don't do, or, a condition, with a condition?
Then they're not truly saying you're forgiven. They're not accepting the full bid of forgiveness.
Okay.
They're saying, I'll forgive you this much, but not all of it. So it's a conditional forgiveness.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the good news with that is fine. Just work within those parameters. You can create a smaller reconciliation within those parameters because that's what they can handle. Do you understand? And then it may expand into becoming more and more unconditional. The point is, truths need to be told, truths need to be ventilated, all right? In order to purge it out, gather resilience, and let it go and be done, okay? Then the next death's door or phase is then when the victim says, I forgive you, and that's recognized by the persecutor and recognized by the victim, that, from one side to the other, that the persecutor asks for forgiveness and it is given, and we both recognize that. Then naturally, the next death's door for the victim to move through is that they accept the persecutor. I accept you for who you are. Yes, I accept that you were my persecutor. I accept you, not beyond the role. I accept you as a human being. This is what this is. I recognize that beyond the role, you are a human being. I accept you. Okay, this is acceptance beyond the role. And then the persecutor recognizes that. Because what can happen here is a ton of guilt and shame and self-punishment and, because the heart really starts to open here on the persecutor's end, okay? The floodgates of heart will open. And this is where they're getting the validation and they're accepting the validation. Do you guys understand this here? Okay. They're going through a death's door and it's a total loss of power. Then when that can be done, now the persecutor can forgive themselves. I forgive myself for being the persecutor. I forgive myself for being the original victim. I forgive myself for victimizing. I forgive myself for everything. And once that forgiveness happens and I accept that forgiveness towards myself, I can accept myself in the full cycle. Okay, they're accepting that full cycle of everything I've been, everything I am in that full cycle, and they're released. They're releasing themselves, okay? That has nothing to do with the victim anymore, okay? This is the persecutor doing an internal reconciliation. At the same time, and even when the victim witnesses that, and it's almost like the victim is forgiving themselves, accepting themselves, and then they start to dissolve and disappear. Now, the victim is left holding the entire cycle, okay? They're holding two polarities at once, like two ends of the polarity at once. They still have a chance of restarting the cycle by A, finding another person, or victimizing themselves. So what's important is that they accept themselves. I accept that I'm a victim. I accept that I gave up my second half of the cycle. I accept the sacrifice, okay? I accept myself as victim and that I was victimized. And then forgiveness of self, because they could start persecuting themselves, saying, why did you do that? Look, your persecutor got away scot-free. No account. Oh, they needed to still pay, right? They need to forgive themselves, A, that they are a victim, forgive themselves that they gave up the possibility of being a persecutor, that they forgive themselves for not going through the whole cycle. Does this sound strange? And then they can be released. So in a way, and what can actually happen is, in order for them to accept themselves and forgive themselves, they may move through the rest of that cycle as an internal persecutor. But then, and then they may be having to go through this entire thing within themselves, acceptance that they are the victim, recognition of that, asking them to forgive themselves as a persecutor to themselves, going through all of this, forgiving themselves as a persecutor to themselves, accepting that, and then accepting themselves as a victim, and then forgiving themselves as a victim. And the one most likely last thing they're going to forgive themselves for is that they were a victim in the first place, and that they allowed that to happen somehow.
It's a double cycle for the victim, but
Basically.
It's easier for the persecutor.
Yeah.
Because
But now can you
understand himself, he can release himself. The other one, he will still have the internal fight.
The persecutor always has the advantage because they've lived through the entire cycle. You see, the victim has not. They've only lived through half.
Yeah.
And they're missing that other half to live through. So either they're fast forwarding themselves through it, or they're completely dropping it and like missing out, and it feels really unbalanced. So do you understand how it is far more difficult for the victim to let go? Because they're in the unfair position.
Yeah.
So we begin as victims, we end as victims, and when we reconcile from the victim role, basically.
Which is necessary as it is a creative flow of life.
Mm-hmm.
And life gets thrown into the universe and then just starts to grow because it can and because it chooses to do so. And it's discovering the universe, or let's say the world. It's discovering the world through the means of being persecuted. Like, I have to survive. Life is cruel. But the more I discover and uncover, the more I learn, the more I grow, the stronger I get.
Mm-hmm.
And what we gain is, even though we stay victims, what we gain is, well, the humbleness, and we gain the beauty of life. Or something like it.
Yeah. So just some notes on that some people are in a rush to forgive or beg for forgiveness. Some people are in a rush to retaliate, okay? And that's happening right now. If you look at social media, there's these demands, right? You know, that enough is enough, Black Lives Matter, you need to say I'm sorry. And then some white people are freaking out and saying, oh my God, yeah, please forgive me. They're rushing into it. Okay, or they may be rushing to retaliate, to defend themselves, or the Black Lives Matter is saying, it's enough is enough. We've got the power now. We're gonna give you a taste of your own medicine, or we're making our demands, whatever. Okay, both sides do not rush to forgive or retaliate, because if we forgive, seeking validation, like, look at me, I forgave, I'm the martyr now. Look at me, I forgave, I'm the hero. Look at me, I forgave. Look at the sacrifice I've made. That's all seeking validation and recognition. We're returning to the victim role. We haven't gotten out of it. We've just returned to it because we're seeking validation. We're using forgiveness to seek validation. If we forgive in order to say, you know what, I'll just forgive you, it's okay. I won't hold you accountable. I'll just let it go. Let bygones be bygones. I'm doing that because I don't want to use power and I'd rather submit because it's easier, I'm returning to the victim because I am not embracing power, okay? When I'm in a position to forgive, I'm also in a position of power, and I can hold you accountable. I can say, yes, I want to forgive you. And we need to balance the scales here. Or show me that you're sorry. I mean, there's all of that. And I got to recognize that I'm borrowing from persecutor role when I ask that stuff. But also, if I'm okay with that, then I'm also okay using my power. I'm actually fast forwarding into reconciliation. But if I say, you know what, you're asking forgiveness. Hey, buddy, you're going to have to pay for that. I'm going to, have to take one of your eyes now. Like, that's now exacting revenge. Okay. That's not coming from a sense of unity or love. That is coming from a sense of, I've got the power and I'm going to use it because I can, because I want to, because I've got to balance this. Okay. That's different. Okay. That's when we retaliate to unleash power. We got to know we become a persecutor and we're victimizing for revenge. So there we're perpetuating. All right. So if you're using forgiveness to avoid using power, you're still a victim. If you're retaliating to unleash power, you're becoming a persecutor. And then you're victimizing in order to exact revenge. Okay, go ahead, Yusuf, you want to say something there? Or no? Because you got your hand up. Or else is it just you're smoking?
No. For the second point, it's a bit, it's a bit, there is a thin line I don't understand.
It's very thin. It's really thin. The way to tell is, am I coming from resilience or non-resilience? Okay, same here. Am I coming from resilience or non-resilience? This is the fine line between justice and accountability and revenge, right? Am I resilient when holding accountable? Am I resilient? Because each person needs to be accountable to their role and what they've done, okay?
Okay.
But I don't have to over-exact justice, over-exact revenge, or say, justice will never be enough. It'll never be enough. It'll never be enough. That's an abuse of power, okay? That's when I'm coming from a non-resilient place because I'm never satisfied. Because imagine I say, hey, you need to pay for what you've done, and you're in a resilient place, and you say, okay, I get it, here, boom, boom, boom. And then I'm going to say, wait a minute, that was just too easy. Why was it too easy? Because I didn't see you suffer. Why didn't you suffer? Because you already worked it out within yourself. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And I may not believe it. And I'll say, wait a minute, you didn't, I guess I shortchanged myself. I should have asked you to pay a higher price. Okay. That's me coming from non-resilience. I'm not accepting that you accepted the punishment and paid. Do you get it?
It's a bargain. It will be like a bargain just to maintain the status.
Yeah. So we can't use forgiveness as a leveraging chip. Okay. Forgiveness is just forgiveness. If it's good, we're going to do it, we do it. Okay. Rather, before forgiveness, hold accountability to get that out of your system, then go into the bit of forgiveness. Okay.
Yeah.
If we retaliate for justice and recognition, like, look, I made him pay. I'm a hero. I've just become a persecutor for heroism. Okay. I'm no better. All right. So, and the last one is, if we withhold forgiveness just out of stubbornness, fearful stubbornness, we're now holding the other person prisoner, and we have to know we just became the persecutor as well. Like, I just can't possibly forgive you, and I don't know if I ever will. No matter what you do, no matter how much you beg or plead, I can't ever forgive you. I'm withholding it. I'm being stubborn. Because what would be the alternative? I will feel like I let you win, and I will feel like I lost. So that's out of fear. Okay, that's a death's door for myself. All right. Is that making sense for you guys here? I have to know I'm holding you prisoner when I withhold forgiveness, especially when it's coming out of fearful stubbornness on my part. Go ahead, Benjamin. And I might feel justified in that.
So the death door to myself, I don't want to go through, becomes the prison of the other.
That's right. Well, both of us, actually, because I have to be, you're my prisoner. I'm now the warden. I'm the keeper, right?
And that triggers the complementary action on the other side.
Yep.
And we are imprisoning, so we
Each
are
other.
locked into each other's.
That's right. Because now, okay, let's say for 20 years, you were torturing me, right? Then we had a power flip and I was able to escape. And now I'm retaliating and I'm saying, you need to confess and you need to pay. And right. And you're on your knees now and I'm got all the power. And if I say, I will not forgive you yet, because you haven't paid enough, I'm now your captor, you're now my prisoner, and the tables have turned. And now we go for another 20 years where I'm holding you hostage, but I'm still calling you my persecutor. I'm in denial that I'm the persecutor because I'm living in the past saying I was victimized by you, right? That's when it really gets distorted, and where it goes wrong is when the victim does not admit or realize or refuses to admit they've flipped. Do you guys understand? They'll say it's in the name of justice and I'll make you pay and I'll make you pay and I'll make you pay. But there comes a point when they've decided that because they've decided you haven't paid enough, they're going to persecute you and use that to persecute you. So that's when it flips. You may have paid 10 times. It still will never be enough for them. That's when they're persecuting. Do you guys understand that? It flips the balance. Okay. All right, let's see. We've got very little left to do here. So here's the summary. So obviously it's difficult to do this. So the first step to breaking the cycle is to do our own internal reconciliation. Start to reconcile our own heart and power centers. The way we do that is for each center to feel its own strength and resilience within and start exchanging those strengths between them, okay? It's a give and receive between the power centers, that they'll recognize each other's strengths and they'll resiliently receive the strengths from each other and generously give, okay? So it's an active give and receive. And that's how we start to resiliently use heart and power together, all right? I could do a whole webinar just on that, the give and receive, all right? Forgiveness cannot be done for the sake of heroism, justice, validation, martyrdom, recognition, punishment, more, or self-flattery, or to impress anybody, or to make others fearful, or to make others feel guilty or shamed. Those are all game plays. They're all manipulations. They're manipulations of reconciliation. So then where does forgiveness come from? It is simply generously given and received. It's done from love and unity, a direct experience of love and unity. This is the idea of love your enemy. Be unified with your enemy. Recognize friend and foe are the same, okay? And it's done from resilience and from humility. It's done being at peace with ourselves and each other. If we're not ready to enter that state, we cannot force it. So don't obligate yourself to get there, okay? We can only work on our own death's door one at a time as it presents itself, okay? And that is your own death's door. So back to Philippe, like Philippe, you're saying, well, hey, you know, I'm repackaging, or I'm working on things. What you're doing is step by step. You're doing one death's door at a time, right? So you got to recognize that this isn't complete forgiveness, but it is making steps toward that final, ultimate, unconditional reconciliation and forgiveness. And maybe that doesn't happen in the lifetime, right? And maybe it does. And maybe it doesn't happen with both of you physically in the room, but it can happen within yourself really at any time, okay? And we can do these in big or small stages. Don't put a condition on it, like it has to be all or nothing, all right? Because then we start victimizing ourselves, okay? Is that clear what I'm saying there around we can't force these stages along? All we can do is really build our resilience to be able to pass through each door. And just so you know, that the act of forgiveness begins a process of the total crumbling of the identity. It's a total annihilation. And that's why we meet a series of death's doors, because there's phases of that identity crumbling. There's phases of us trying to get it back or cling to it. Okay? Each door allows us to absorb a lesson within ourselves and let go of a layer of identity. And therefore, then we become more and more connected to source and essence, and that we don't need the identity to feel like we exist. So forgiveness is not complete until the identity in that game is completely dissolved on both sides. You can't have a victim that dissolves and then a persecutor left standing, or a persecutor that dissolves and a victim left standing, okay? Because they're just going to pull a persecutor back in, okay? Both are dissolving. And this is the big tell if there is forgiveness happening, that there is an exchange of gratitude between each other for both roles, for the whole game that was played, and for all the lessons learned. And that gratitude is coming from a sense of love, unconditional love and unity. And it's like, it's almost like Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, you know, played their movie, okay? And then the director yells, cut. George Lucas says, cut. And then you got Mark Hamill and the guy behind the Darth Vader suit, and they sit and have a coffee and say, oh my God, great game, huh? That was great when you did this. Oh, I loved playing with you. It's wonderful, man, you know, like we're such a team. Do you understand? It's like that. You've stepped out of the roles so completely. And it's the true essence to the true essence that have that mutual gratitude, appreciation, and unity and love for each other. That's what it's like. Does that sound weird? Okay. So final point, when presented with the choice to forgive, yes, it will feel like the ultimate victimization. It's like you're put between a rock and a hard place, and neither choice is going to feel good. Do I forgive or do I perpetuate? Or do I abandon this whole thing and pretend it's not even happening? That sacrifice to forgive, it's a sacrifice to forgive. That sacrificing of saying, I denounce going through the rest of the cycle. I stop here at the line. I don't cross over to persecutor. That will feel unbearable. And know that it's unbearable for the persecutor also, because they may want to let go, and you basically have the power to hold them back. And they'll want and beg and plead, right? Or it may be unbearable for them to even initiate the reconciliation, okay? So for both sides, don't rush in. Cultivate resilience, acceptance, and humility within yourself. Gradually learn the lessons that are presented by each other. And always hold both roles accountable, coming from a foundation of love, unity, and gratitude, as opposed to a foundation of fear, shame, guilt, resentment, in the name of justice, because it's that very door you go through that will lead to perpetuating the cycle, all right? And basically, the persecutor will, when they're moving through a genuine forgiveness, they are already holding themselves accountable. They are already working through all of that within themselves. So you could think you're making them pay, but if it's not triggering them to do that internal work, they're just doing their time. Do you guys understand that? It's easy to sit in prison for 20 years and not go through that internal reconciliation. And then as soon as I get out and I've got my freedom, I'm going to continue my role because I'm not sorry. Do you guys understand that? So no matter how much you think you'll make somebody pay, it doesn't mean there's a reconciliation. The best way to hold someone accountable is to trigger them to drop in, trigger them into their own resilience and begin to have more self-awareness, self-acceptance, and humility in order to see themselves and see both roles. How does that sound to you guys when I say that?
It makes a lot of sense. So there's a story of this native tribes that had this ritual that when there were wrongdoers in the community, they would gather him up with everyone else, and everyone who has known him from the very beginning of his or her life would tell this person how many good things he or she had done in her life, and what good of a person he or she has been all of the time. And I think this might be a pattern here, might be that pattern of, let's say, trying to really raise the resilience, humility, acceptance of the person.
Right. And it's to work with the persecutor in that sense, understanding the persecutor came from victim and they're gradually moving towards victim. Okay. And so there's an internal reconciliation that happens. Now, of course, I'm not saying, okay, let's let all the criminals run free. No, contain them for the sake of keeping society safe, but just don't throw them in a prison and abandon them either. I mean, or in your relationships, don't throw somebody in prison in the doghouse and then abandon it. It's not about making them pay. It's about having them be aware, and having us be aware of how are we working with each other together, building resilience within ourselves, each other in the relationship, and triggering that gradual drop through acceptance and humility. It's a different way of creating justice and accountability, as opposed to just punishment and reward, because punishment and reward is a polarity. It's a game. I don't know what to say more on that, because I just want to be very clear that forgiveness does not mean let the criminals run free. But the criminals need to go through their own process of internal reconciliation. And there's a call to go through that, to facilitate that. And we can all facilitate each other because we are both roles. Our next webinar is on June 24th, and it's called Reconciling Essence and Identity. This takes, again, along the same theme, but it's this more, okay, so how do I, am I supposed to eliminate identity? No. Okay, every time you dissolve one game, a new game is going to appear, and there's going to be more aspects of identity. So how do you get essence and identity working together so that we can create in the world we live in? And then for those seeing the recording, we have the training modules coming up in October, okay, in Paris. And I'm doing it in Frankfurt, not Munich now, for October 9th. And then if there's more questions from anyone, you can email me, info@essence-dynamics.com. The website is essence-dynamics.com. And we have featured webinars there, other archived webinar recordings, as well as on our YouTube channel, EE Dynamics. So from you guys that have hung around for the long haul, oh my God, this is long again, but I mean, these are meaty subjects. So what are you left with, just for the sake of the recording, to say, okay, here's what I'm walking away with, this is what I take, and then if you still have further things you want to talk about or discuss, I'll stop the recording and I'll hang out for you guys for a bit longer too. And thank you for sticking around this long. Okay. What do you take away from part 2 here? Yeah. Benjamin, yeah, go ahead.
So 2 things. The one thing is that forgiveness is, what I got out of this is a dynamic relating to myself and projecting continuously as a cycle to the exterior. And it's related to the destiny I need to go through. Once I do, I'm moving backwards towards unity. But that only happens through connecting back through unity. So I'm anticipating going back, or actually connecting to unity, which is reinforcing itself. And well, the second thing I forgot.
If it comes back, it comes back. Okay. Yeah, it might get triggered back by what anyone else says. So.
But I accept it. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
I
So
get
you
away.
forgive yourself.
What I get.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Apart from this webinar, actually, it's about being aware. The state, either I was a victim or I was a prosecutor. So it's the state of it, and it will not dissolve. It will keep repeating itself until I'm aware that, oh, okay, and actually I didn't prosecute the person or the situation, I prosecute myself. I raise my anger, I raise my shame, I raise that. And what I need to do is like neutralize this in me. In the case of the victim also, it's like always repeating the story, the story, the story. But the dream of it also is like to reconcile this victimhood in me. And this will give me power, not to prosecute again, but not to be a victim again. But again, you mentioned it will happen. I will drop into another story, but at least I break a pattern there.
Right, and what I must be very clear on, with each pattern we reconcile and dissolve, that allows a new pattern to appear. So it's not like we're trying to escape the world of games. It's like learn the game we're in, master the lesson, dissolve it, let a new game appear. And that's a form of evolution, moving from game to game, as opposed to suffering and repeating the same game again and again and again and again. And what I see right now as an opportunity for humanity is we're at a crossroads for some very archetypal classic games that we've been playing for thousands of years. When this is an opportunity to really look at the lesson it's presenting for us to really look within ourselves and build resilience, build acceptance, cultivate humility, and start dropping more into what it feels like to experience unconditional love and start dropping into unity. And that means letting go of the identity, letting go of the story, even letting go of history in a sense. And if that truly reconciles the game of oppression, I have no idea what then might appear. But that would be an amazing moment if we could really reconcile and dissolve that game. It would be a brave new world of something else. We would still be creators, but what would it be like to create from unity or with diversity, with still an underlying unity? You know, and then there would be new dramas, but it's a level above.
Essence phase for a while, then something will break and something will be created. But also at one point you mentioned and 2 slides ago that it should be ready. Either it provoked from a event or provoked from awareness, or it will never happen until you are fully ready. Otherwise it will be keep game shaping.
That's right. That is advice to you, the opposing side, and to the mediator. You can't force this. Nobody will go if they're not ready. They'll bounce out. They'll bounce out of it, right? Basically, that reconciliation is we're settling back into source, and source will not absorb a lie because source is unified truth, right? So you can't fake it down there. So, anyone else? Paul, Philippe, what closes it? Final words? And like I said in the beginning, it's not easy material to deal with. We could do days and days and days of this. And I never said I'm promising a resolution or a solution. What this is more of a guide to understand mechanics, how these polarities work, and then how to work with them. Yeah, go ahead, Paul. Yeah.
So I'm looking for a meta skill to learn here. Is it just resilience? Like in general, should I? It's like that. Huh? Should I just like
skill of or a new outlook on resilience and the usefulness of it?
Like that, like really building into my structure of life, like regular sources of resilience to cultivate it on a higher level, to be more sharp and withstanding when I figure out, whoa, this is a game, like that. Thank you.
And Philippe, anything to add? If not, you can give me a thumbs up. Oh yeah, here you are. Okay.
I'm good.
You're good?
Yeah, I'm good.
I think what I'd like to leave us with then here is just as a final word, which just came to my mind, is it's really easy to, I mean, we start as victim. It can be, when we're in that side of the cycle, it's so distasteful to think of becoming a persecutor. We can slip over to that side, but still keep thinking we're victims. And what it really does is, like, what I'm hoping this does for us is, in a way, if we keep carrying around our victim role, our victim shield, our victim weapons, saying, you know, don't victimize me, point fingers, you need to say you're sorry, you know, you need to, like, if we're trying to rush the persecutors to say they're sorry, right? Then what we're really doing is we're infantilizing ourselves. We're infantilizing ourselves, where we're saying, I'm not responsible for my life's experiences. I'm going to keep wearing diapers so that you can actually keep victimizing me, but I'll say it's wrong. And I'll say, you're a bad person. But I'm not going to take off my own diapers, pick myself up, and walk. This is very harsh for people who keep playing the victim card. The sooner we realize that it's always a choice to remain a victim, it's always a choice to cross the line into a persecutor, and it's always a choice to simply pay attention and learn from the game from a resilient place and find how we're all complementary to each other. That is a choice that we're always making. The easy choice is to say, it's not my fault, it's not my problem. It's easy, it's the easy choice to point the finger and say, it's your fault. You've made my life miserable, and you've made me underprivileged. You with all the advantages. That's easy to say. And then it's easy for me to feel better about myself and say, you see, my suffering is now justified because of you. And my suffering will not end until you end. And not only that, you need to pay for it first, and then you end, and then I'm free. I've just trapped myself, and I've just held myself prisoner. So what I'm hoping is that for everything that happens, it's not that we start persecuting ourselves and say, God, how am I the creator of everything that's bad, and how is it all my fault, and I'm contributing to all my own suffering and problems. It's not that. It's that step out and say, all right, so this is happening. Basic acceptance. Now basic resilience. How am I still alive while this is happening? And then get some distance and say, what is this teaching me? And how is this actually encouraging me to grow, live, and expand as a divine human being? So that's what I would like to leave everyone with. And it's a way to look at the cycles of our games. So the sooner we take the diapers off and accept ourselves as victim and persecutors, the sooner we can start learning the lessons of our games and move on to new games. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining, for sticking around for part 2. And then please join us in 2 weeks for the June 24th webinar, Reconciling Essence and Identity.